Hi, I'm Kristen Pinto. Our group's standing project on Chapter 8 is on short-term business decisions. The project's on page 471, T855 on relevant information to outsourcing decisions. Outsourcing is also known as make or buy, and for the decision rule to outsource, you want to know if incremental costs of making are less than the incremental costs of outsourcing, then you should make, versus if the incremental costs of making exceed the incremental cost of outsourcing, then you should outsource. For further information on our project, the guy is John Menard, and he's founder of Menards. It's a home improvement store. He wants to know whether he should invest $45 million on making a new plant which will produce products, a line of his own products, which is countertops, picnic tables, and cabinets. And his other option is to buy from outside suppliers. So his decision rule in whether or not he should make or outsource is, if making is sufficiently more profitable than outsourcing, then he will build the new plant.
Hi, my name is Molly Withrow, and I'm going to be talking to you about Requirement 1, which is relevant versus irrelevant information. The definition of relevant information is expected future data that differs amongst alternatives. Another factor that managers need to take into consideration is relevant non-financial information, which is qualitative factors that play a role in managers' decisions. A qualitative factor occurs in the future and differs between alternatives. The definition of irrelevant information is that it does not affect your decision, and it only clouds the picture and creates information overload. An example of this would be a sunk cost, and a sunk cost is a cost that is incurred in the past and cannot be changed regardless of the situation. So in Requirement 1, John Maynard has asked our consulting group for a recommendation of whether making or outsourcing would be more profitable. So before we can do that, we must consider which items are relevant in making that decision. So item A is the unit sales prices of the countertops, cabinets, and picnic tables. So the sales prices that Maynard charges its customers. That item would be irrelevant because the cost will be the same, or the prices will be the same regardless of if he makes or outsources. And then B is the prices that outside suppliers would charge Maynard's for 3 products if Maynard's decides to outsource the products rather than make them. And that would be relevant because it differs amongst alternatives in the fact that if Maynard outsources the products, the suppliers will charge him those prices. If he makes them himself, then he will not incur those costs. For item C, it's the $45 million to build the new plant. And this is relevant because if Maynard decides to build the new plant, he will incur $45 million, and if he decides to outsource, he won't incur the $45 million, but he may take on other costs that come along with outsourcing. And item D is the direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead that Maynard's would incur to manufacture the 3 product lines. That's also relevant because if Maynard decides to outsource, he wouldn't incur these costs, but if he decides to make them, he would incur them. So they differ amongst alternatives, and they also are costs that would be incurred in the future. And then the last one is Maynard's salary, which is irrelevant because regardless of whether Maynard decides to make or outsource the product, he's still going to have that salary, so it doesn't make a difference among the alternatives.
My name is Eric Carter, and I'm going to be doing Requirement 2 for our project. My part was to determine whether Menard should make or outsource the products depending on the amount of profit you can make on each one versus the other. And also determining the annual difference in cash flow if Menard decides to make rather than outsource. Here shows the example of the countertops with your variable cost, direct materials, direct labor, and variable manufacturing overhead. This is when the company decides to make the product rather than outsource it. This comes to a total of $30 versus if he purchased from an outside supplier, it would cost $40. So on average per unit, you're going to be saving $10 by making it rather than buying it. The next example, very similar, is with cabinets. You have the variable costs, adding them up, you're at a total of $17 to make it, whereas if you bought it from an outside supplier, you would be costing $25 per unit, giving you a difference of $8 per unit. The next one is picnic tables, and this one is a little bit more than the others, coming to a total of $19 per unit is how much you're going to be saving by making the product rather than buying it. When you take these values, the difference of making it rather than buying and how much you're going to be saving per unit, and you times it by the numbers sold for each year in annual sales, all you have to simply do is take the numbers sold, times it by savings per unit, and get your total savings for countertops, cabinets, and picnic tables. Upon that, you can add them all up. The plant is supposed to be operating for a total of 15 years, which is where you're going to get your 15 from. Your total savings is these three numbers added up from countertops, cabinets, and picnic tables, giving you a total savings of almost $8 million per year when they decide to make the product rather than buy it. The cost of the plant was originally $45 million to start, so that would be a relevant factor in whether you should make it versus buying it from an outside supplier, and the fact that from your annual sales over a 15-year span, will you have enough money to cover the initial cost of the plant of $45 million? And according to the calculations, you're going to have a total savings of almost $120 million after the 15 years because you decided to make it instead of buy it. So that well covers it well beyond $45 million. So, in conclusion, the decision you would like to make is it's going to be more profitable to make the product rather than outsource it. Therefore, Menard should build a new plant and should make the products themselves to maximize profits.